Hi, I'm Michael Hughes, and this is Contract Mastery.
Let's finish up our discussion of the 1-to-4 family residential contract by having a look at page 10, which is the broker information page. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the MLS offer of compensation. But starting with the broker information page. Thing to remember about the broker information page is it is exactly what it says it is. It is an information page. It is not a part of the contract. It is not part of the agreement between buyer and seller. It is not an agreement between the two brokers or brokerages because neither the agent nor the broker nor anyone signs the 1-to-4 contract other than buyer and seller. So the brokers are not making any promises to each other on page 10 or anywhere in the 1-to-4 contract. The broker information page only serves as a source of information for the parties, for the brokers, and for the title company. Here's a full view of the broker information page. You can see that it's set up to have information about two different brokerages, one on the left side, one on the right side. And it has space in here for information about three different real estate licensees. But in any particular transaction, the most you will ever have is two different agents' information filled in on the broker information page. I want to look at how you complete this document in light of a few different scenarios. One of those being the cooperating broker transaction, which is really the most common one, the intermediary transaction, and in those cases where we are dealing with a sub-agent. But we'll start with the cooperating broker transaction. This is the most common one that we're going to see, and it's going to use the top of the page and it's going to use both sides of the page. In this particular situation, we have one agent who is representing the buyer only as the buyer's agent, and one side representing the seller only as the seller's agent. One thing to remember about the broker information page, these top lines up here, this is for the brokerage information. So if you're sponsored by an entity, let's say eXp Realty LLC, then it's going to be the brokerage information and the brokerage license number that goes on the top line. It is not going to be a sponsoring broker or a designated managing broker or anything like that. This is the entity's information. On the right-hand side of the page is always where the listing broker is written in. And on the left-hand side of the page, the contract calls it the other broker firm. What we mean here is the buyer's agent or the buyer's broker. So let's assume that our agent is representing the buyer in this particular transaction. So we would be on the left-hand side of the page. We would check the box that says buyer only as buyer's agent, and then we would write in the buyer's agent information on these lines. We would write in the associate's name and their license number, the associate's email address, and their phone number. And remember, it's important to have accurate information. Not only is the other party relying on this to be able to contact you if the agent needs to contact you, but the title company is relying on this information to get in touch with you as well. On the blank that says team name, if you are a member of a TREC registered team, then you will put the registered team name on this line. And then for the rest of the information, you can get this on the Texas Welcome Center's website, but I've written it all in here for you. The licensed supervisor of Texas real estate agents for eXp Realty is Tony King. That is Tony's personal license number there. And then that is the Austin address. I know that we have a lot of different Regis addresses throughout the state, but when it comes to writing in information on the contract, you do need to use the Austin address. So that's how it would work in a co-op transaction. Whatever side you're representing, you would fill in only one side of the broker information page. In this example, we assumed that we were representing the buyer. Let's take a look at an intermediary transaction because you fill the broker information page out differently for an intermediary transaction. For an intermediary transaction, we are only going to use the right-hand side of the page because in an intermediary, both the listing agent and the buyer's agent are members of the same brokerage firm. So we're going to list everything on the right-hand side of the page, starting with the listing agent. So we'll put in the brokerage information on top. We're going to put the listing agent information. I'm leaving out the team name because I didn't want it to get too cluttered. But we put in the licensed supervisor information, office address, office phone number. And then for the buy side, we put in the buyer agent information. So buyer agent personal information, again, I've left out the Trek name, and then the information about the licensed supervisor and the office address. All of this on the right-hand side of the page because we're in an intermediary situation and the listing agent and the buyer's agent are all members of the same brokerage. So let's take a look at a pretty rare circumstance, actually, when we have a sub-agent. When we have a sub-agent, we're dealing with two separate brokerages. So we're back to the top of the page where we would have the listing broker and the listing agent on the right-hand side of the page, and we would have the sub-agent's brokerage and all of their information on the left-hand side of the page. But in a sub-agent situation, one thing to notice is that both brokerages here are representing the seller because the person representing the buyer does not have a signed buyer-tenant representation agreement. Therefore, they are a sub-agent of the seller. But for purposes of the broker information page, we're going to use the top of it. We're going to use both sides of the page because we're dealing with two different brokerages, but we're going to check the box that shows that both brokers here are representing the seller. As we go down to the bottom of the page, we have this disclosure statement. And what it says is, pursuant to a previous separate agreement, such as an MLS offer of compensation or some other agreement between the brokers, the listing broker has agreed to pay the other broker a fee, and you write in what that fee is. This disclosure is for informational purposes and does not change the previous agreement between the brokers to pay or to share a commission. Once again, the brokers are not a party to the 1-to-4 contract. Neither broker is making any promise or agreement in the 1-to-4 contract, and that includes commission promises. So the information on the broker information page about commissions, again, this is strictly informational only, and it is for the benefit of the title agent, so they will know how much commission to put on the closing statement. If the listing broker or if either one of the brokers really decides to write in a number for the compensation on that disclosure statement that is different from what is in the MLS offer of compensation, that is not binding at all. It's meaningless because neither brokerage is a party to the 1-to-4 contract. So neither brokerage is making any sort of promise or agreement with respect to agent compensation. In fact, if you remember back, we have said previously, all obligations of the parties to pay commissions to their respective agents are found in their representation agreements, either the listing agreement or the buyer tenant representation agreement or the MLS offer of compensation. And so, if you recall, when we were discussing paragraph 8, what we said was if you are looking in the 1-to-4 contract for any information on how an agent is going to be paid or how much an agent is going to be paid, well, then
let me see your identification.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
then you are looking in the wrong document. This is not the agreement you are looking for. So anything that's written in on the broker information page, once again, is informational only. And it does not change any agreement either by the seller to pay a listing commission or the buyer to pay a buyer's agent's commission. And it also does not change any MLS offer of compensation from the listing brokerage to the buyer's brokerage. Well, in that case, okay, so where exactly is the agreement to pay the buyer agent commission? Where is that agreement located? And that agreement is found in the MLS offer of compensation. One thing to understand here, it's a common misconception that the seller is the one paying the buyer agent's commission. We say that all the time. The buyer's agent's commission is paid by the seller. But that actually is not correct. It is the listing brokerage that agrees to share the listing commission with the buyer's brokerage. That is actually how the buyer's brokerage gets paid. The listing brokerage agrees to share their listing commission. Okay, well, where does the listing brokerage make that offer? Where is that promise found? And that is where we look to the MLS offer of compensation. If you look at an MLS report and you pull up the agent version of the report that has all of the commission and compensation information, this is one out of HAR. Yours may look a little different. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page and you find where on that document there is an offer of compensation, that is the MLS offer of compensation. Just that simple, just that brief, that is it right there. Well, how can that work? That's just an entry in an MLS report. I mean, what's going on here? Okay. The MLS offer of compensation is actually an offer for a unilateral contract. We want to get into the technicalities of contract law. This is what we're dealing with here. A unilateral contract. What is that, you may ask? Okay. Contracts can be bilateral or they can be unilateral. Those are the two categories of contracts. They're either bilateral or they're unilateral. A bilateral contract is a two-way exchange of promises. Julie promises to do this if Sam promises to do that. Julie promises to give Sam a pack of gum if Sam will give her $1. That is a two-way exchange of promises that the parties then go on to fulfill. That is a bilateral contract. A unilateral contract is different because it is a one-way promise that the other party accepts by their action. So in this example, it would be Julie promises to do this if Sam does that. I promise to do something if you actually do something for me. That's a unilateral contract. Let me give you an example of one. Let's think about an offer for a reward. Julie posts a sign on the light pole that offers a $500 reward for anyone who returns her lost puppy. Sam finds the puppy and brings it back to Julie. Sam has now accepted Julie's offer by performing the required action. He has done what she asked him to do. Now Julie is obligated to pay that reward. She is contractually bound to pay the reward that she offered if someone brought her back her lost puppy. Well, now let's look at it in the context of a real estate transaction. Listing agent Julie promises to pay a specific commission to any buyer's agent who brings a willing and able buyer that actually purchases the home and closes the transaction. And she makes that offer by writing in a specific number in the MLS Offer of Compensation field, and it shows up on the MLS report. Buyer agent Sam brings a buyer who enters into the purchase contract for the home and actually goes on to close the transaction. Buyer agent Sam has now accepted listing agent Julie's compensation offer because Sam brought a buyer who actually closed the transaction. At that point, listing agent Julie is now obligated to pay the promised commission. That is an MLS offer of compensation in a nutshell. It can get more complicated than that. Anything can get more complicated, right? When we start talking about procuring cause and all that kind of stuff. But at its bare bones, this is an MLS offer of compensation. This is where you find it. It is in the MLS report as the offer to pay the buyer's agent commission. Now, one thing you need to remember about MLS offers of compensation and the MLS report in general when you are making an offer. Because of the MLS offer of compensation and where it is found, where it is located, and the fact that the MLS listing itself is under the control of the listing agent. This is the reason it is so important for the buyer agent to print a copy of the MLS report when the offer is made and have the buyer sign and date that report when you are getting your offer documents signed by the buyer. That does a couple of things for you. Not only does it make the buyer acknowledge in writing everything that is in the MLS report, which is a good thing, but it also captures what the MLS compensation offer was at the time that the buyer's agent submitted the purchase offer. That is important just in case somehow, some way, the offer to pay the buyer's commission gets changed after the offer is submitted. It is not unheard of for an offer to be submitted and then somehow, some way, the number on the MLS report gets changed, say from a 3 to a 2, or a 3 to a 2.5, or a 2.5 to a 2, or something. So it's very important for these two reasons. You always want to print the MLS report, the agent version with all of the information on it, send it to the buyer, have them sign it and date it along with all of the other offer documents, and keep that document in your files. One, it's most likely going to be required for your transaction anyway. But two, that way you will have written proof what the MLS offer of compensation was when you submitted the offer.